So to kick things off, wanted to take a few minutes to sort of explain how the plants generally grow inside the system. So for lettuces as our first example, you'll see that the growth cycle is split up into three distinct stages. So the first one is kind of that like seeding stage, which is when we actually plant the seeds and they stay in what's called the seedling area. So it's a more condensed version where we can basically start all of the plants in the same area and allow them that first 2 weeks to germinate and start to kind of grow their true leaves. At that point, once they hit that 2 week mark for lettuces, it goes into the final location, which is called the growing rafts, which is what you see on the right-hand side of the screen there. So that's a floating styrofoam raft where the plants will stay until they are at full size and ready for harvest. And then that's that third stage that you see down at the bottom. There's a full harvest that happens at the 6 week mark. So we're going to kind of go through a couple examples with some different types of products, but this is kind of just to give you an overview of how it works for lettuce. And we'll jump into our second slide here, please, Steph, on lettuce. So the other thing to sort of help illustrate, how the plants generally move through the system. Up at the top here is what we use. It's a farm management software called Artemis. So that is basically a software tool that helps us schedule and plan all of the maintenance tasks, all the production planning. And it, basically think of it as like a personal assistant, if you will. So, once, the seedlings have been in the seedling area for 2 weeks, you'll get a reminder and a task pops up on day 15 there, like you see, where it tells you to move the plants to that secondary location, which is that growing raft. And then the second thing you see there where it says wait 28 days, that's that second 4 week section where that allows the plants to grow to full size. And then again, day 43, you get sort of triggered to complete the harvest task. So just wanted to kind of highlight Artemis because it is quite a powerful tool and very, very crucial for customers in allowing them to kind of track everything that's going on inside the system at any given time. And then down at the bottom, what you see there is just another sort of visual depiction of the production schedule that I had spoken about on the previous slide. So you'll see week 0, that's when we plant the seeds. So that's that first green cell. You wait 2 weeks and then they get transplanted. And then you wait that 4 weeks. And then at that 6 week mark, you've got your first sort of batch of crops that are ready to harvest. And then the second red cell that you see is basically just highlighting that the way we plant the system, it's always sequential. So we're able to, as the first batch is getting harvested, we immediately replace it with a new batch of seedlings. And then you basically would have your second harvest coming up at that 10-week mark. So I know it might be a little bit kind of daunting at first, but we'll go through a couple more examples with herbs and then leafy greens as well, just to kind of talk about the difference. Leafy greens, you'll see very similar. 2 weeks in the seedling area. With the leafy greens, there's 5 weeks in the growing rafts because we are able to get a trim and then you get your full harvest at week 7. So to give some examples of what crops sort of fall under the leafy green category, think of your spinaches, your kales, your arugulas, any of those kind of leafy greens that aren't lettuces are generally what we're able to harvest with that kind of trim and then full harvest at week 7. So we'll jump through to the next slide here to review the Artemis setup for leafy greens. And you'll see this one gets a little bit more complicated because we do have that one added step of being able to get a trim at the 5 week mark. So that's what you see there with day 36. We're able to harvest the first few fully grown leaves and then allow the plant to regrow for another 2 weeks, at which point we do a full harvest. And then you'll see down at the bottom, that's also kind of highlighted. So just to kind of show again, you start with seeding, 2 weeks later, you transplant, 3 weeks later, we get that trim, which is denoted by the yellow cells. Then you're able to do a full harvest at the week or at the 7 week mark. And then again, you would replace that fully harvested plant with a new batch of leafy greens that are then ready to be harvested again just 3 weeks later. We'll jump through and go through our last example for herbs. These ones are the kind of the most complicated schedule. But the nice thing is the way herbs grow, we do get multiple harvests off of them. So you'll see one difference is that the seedling area elapsed time. So that's 3 weeks now instead of 2 weeks. That's because herbs are a little bit slower growing when they first get planted. But as you can see with the great photo on the right with that basil, once they do get growing, they really do take off, which is why we're able to get 3 full trims in by that 12-week mark. But just to kind of highlight that overall growth schedule again, you've got 3 weeks in the seedling area. With the herbs, you let them grow out to the 8-week mark. So they're once they've been in the growing rest for 5 weeks, we get a first trim at that point. You would wait 2 weeks, you get a second trim, you wait another 2 weeks, and then we're able to complete a full harvest. And we'll go through just to see the Artemis schedule for that as well. And you'll see here again, it's kind of up in the seedling area. You wait your 21 days, then you would move them and transplant them, wait the 5 weeks, and then you're able to get those 3 subsequent harvests. And again, it's just kind of another visual depiction down at the bottom with a simple sort of Excel tool that we use to map out the farm to show that kind of growth cycle from week 0 all the way to week 12 when we get that first harvest. So the important thing to kind of highlight here, and one of the main benefits that you really are able to kind of leverage working with controlled environment agriculture, is the predictability of the plants. So I'm sure if we have any kind of soil-based growers, or even anyone that's a bit of a hobby farmer, when you grow outside, you are kind of subject to the elements a little bit. And, sometimes you get a great environment and, great weather. Sometimes it's a little bit slower, and that would have an impact on when you're able to harvest the crops. The nice thing with growing in a controlled environment system is that you do have that kind of consistency where all the inputs, all the temperature, the environmental conditions, and that's what allows us to keep the schedule of the system somewhat rigid, and on a weekly basis allows us to kind of forecast and know exactly what we're going to be growing on a week-to-week basis.